إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سار على سبيله إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. باب ما جاء من التغليظ في من عبد الله عند قبر رجل صالح فكيف إذا عبده. So here it mentions the next chapter in Kitaab tawheed, chapter 20, the chapter of what comes regarding the stern reprimand of the one who worships Allah at the grave of a righteous person. So what about the one who worships the actual grave? So the author rahimahullah, he mentions this chapter of the wisdoms that is mentioned to clarify that how strange the upright practice of Islam has become and the people leaving off tawheed, and what has come regarding the prohibition of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the graves of the righteous people. So it's not a means of associating partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what we mentioned, ما كان وسيلة إلى الشرك الأكبر فهو من الشرك الأصغر. Whatever is a means to major shirk, then this is minor shirk. الدليل الأول, the first evidence that is mentioned, وفي الصحيح عن عائشة رضي الله عنها أن سلمة ذكرت لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كنيسة رأتها بأرض الحبشة وما فيها من الصور فقال أولئك إذا مات فيهم الرجل الصالح أو العبد الصالح بنوا على قبره مسجدا وصوروا فيه تلك الصور أولئك شرار الخلق عند الله فهؤلاء جمعوا بين الفتنتين فتنة القبور وفتنة التماثيل. So the first evidence he mentions, he says that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was informed by Salama when what she saw in Habasha, and she was of those who went to Habasha for Hijrah, and what she saw of the churches and what they contained of idols and images and statues and the likes. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned they are the ones who, when they die, when one of them dies who is a righteous man or a righteous servant, they build over their grave a place of worship and they make those images and idols. They are the worst of the creation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And author rahimahullah, he mentions those people, they combined between two evils: the evil of the graves, or the test of the graves, and the evil of worshipping at the graves or making the graves a place of worship, and the evil of making statues and images of those who deceased and the likes. Of the things that is mentioned, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he is the one who said that those people, they combined between the two evils. And he mentioned that he called it a fitna, a tribulation. Why? Because لأنها سبب لصد الناس عن دينهم. It's of the means that the people will be turned away from their religion. الأصل في القبور أن تكون خارج البنيان أو بنيان حتى لا تكون ذريعة إلى الشرك. The foundation when it comes to graves is that they are to be outside of buildings, so it does not become a means for people to make shirk. And the graves are a greater trial than the statues. And that is because the graves, they are found everywhere. Unlike statues, they are in only certain places. Also, at the graves, many things occur there that don't occur in other places. And from them is fear. People, sometimes they are fearful to go to the graveyard and the likes. But as we can see evidently from what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, that this is from the practices of those who are contrary upon other than Islam, that they will take their graves as places of worship. فالله تعالى نهى المسلمين عن اتخاذ قبور الصالحين ومن باب الأولى قبور الأنبياء والرسل مساجد. Allah has prohibited from the Muslims that they take the graves of the righteous, and more befitting than that, the graves of the prophets and the messengers. Allah has prohibited the Muslims from taking them as places of worship. ولهما وللبخاري ومسلم عنها أن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت لما نزل برسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طفق يطرح خميصة له على وجهه فإذا اغتم بها كشفها فقال وهو كذلك لعنة الله على اليهود والنصارى اتخذوا قبور أنبيائهم مساجد يحذر ما صنعوا ولولا ذلك لأبرز قبره غير أنه خشي أن يتخذ مسجدا أخرج. So it mentions here that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he placed a cloth on his face or tied a cloth to his face, and when it became difficult for him to breathe, he took it off. And whilst he was like that, he mentioned, may Allah's curse be upon the Jews and the Christians. They took the graves of the prophets as places of worship. They took their graves of the prophets as places of worship. So here the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is warning regarding that which they have done, of taking the graves of their prophets as places of worship. As places of worship. And had it not been the case, he would have been buried outside of his home. He would have been buried in a place outside of his home. However, had the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam been buried outside of his home, they would have took that place as a place of worship. They would have built upon it and made it a shrine, as you have seen practices of others who attribute themselves to Islam, especially from the people of Tasawwuf or Tashayyu', the Shia. غير أنه خشي أن يتخذ مسجدا, except the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he feared that his grave will be taken as a place of worship after his death. Also, further emphasizing the next evidence, لمسلم عن جندب ابن عبد الله رضي الله عنه قال: سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قبل أن يموت بخمس. I heard the Prophet Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم before he died by 5 days. وهو يقول: إني أبرأ إلى الله أن يكون لي منكم خليل. He said, I free myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I have from among you a best friend. فإن الله قد اتخذني خليلا كما اتخذ إبراهيم خليلا. For indeed Allah has taken me as a close friend, as he has taken Ibrahim as a close friend. ولو كنت متخذا من أمتي خليلا لاتخذت أبا بكر خليلا. He said, had I taken from this my ummah, a close friend, I would have taken Abu Bakr as a close friend. ألا وإن من كان قبلكم كانوا يتخذون قبور أنبيائهم مساجد ألا فلا تتخذوا القبور مساجد فإني أنهاكم عن ذلك. So here it shows حتى موت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان حريصا على التوحيد. This is evident that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was determined to establish tawheed up until his deathbed. Up until his deathbed, until he passed away. As he was warning the people of what the people before were upon when their prophets and messengers died, that they would take their graves as places of worship. And he said, for indeed I anhaakum an dhalik, I prohibit you from this. And this is something that he did in the end of his life. And he also cursed the one who does it. Any place that a person intends to perform the salah, they have taken it as a masjid. Based on the hadith on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, "Ju'ilat liyal ardu masjidan wa tahura." The earth has been made for me as a place of worship. Wherever you intend to worship, then that place has become a masjid. So if a person worships in the grave, then they have made that place a masjid. Now, it mentions when it speaks about a khamisa, it says this is a type of garment or libas that has signs on it. Though a'lam, it has some form of decorations on it. Now, why is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam buried in the home of Aisha al-Anha? This is based on the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he mentioned ما قبض نبي إلا دفن حيث قبض. No prophet has been taken back to Allah except they are buried wherever they die. And this is also important when you have those who claim false prophecy from the people of misguidance, and you find out the one that they claim to be a prophet died on the toilet. As this has been mentioned a number of times, those who claim to be prophets and they died on toilets. Allah humiliated them. As if they are a prophet, then they are to be buried where they die. So they would have to be buried underneath that toilet. Wallahu musta'an. And from them are those with the Qadiani. This is their situation. And they are not Muslim. As anyone who claims as a prophet after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then he is kafir. لأنه كفر وكذب بالقرآن والسنة وإجماع الأمة. How do you respond to those who say that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is buried in the masjid? Inside the masjid. And we say, in general, we say that this is from Al-Mutashabih, the doubtful matters. And that which is wajib is that we take that which is clear from the Quran and the Sunnah. And you making that claim are from those who are following and seeking that which is doubtful. So we won't listen to you in general. This is a general answer. As for no. Allah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Now, so as for the detailed response to those who claim that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is buried inside the masjid. One, أن المسجد لم يبنى على القبر بل بني المسجد في حياته صلى الله عليه وسلم. One, the masjid was not built upon his grave. The masjid was built during his lifetime. Two, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يدفن في المسجد بل دفن في بيته وكان خارج المسجد. Secondly, he was not buried inside the masjid. He was buried inside his home that was outside the masjid. It never used to be part of the masjid. Thirdly, ادخال الحجرات إلى المسجد ليس باتفاق الصحابة رضي الله عنهم بل بعد أن انقرض أكثرهم وخالف بعد من بقي كما خالف سعيد ibn al-Musayyab. This was not done. Entering the homes of the Prophet Muhammad to the masjid was not done with the agreement of the Sahaba. Rather, after a majority of them had passed away. And from the ones who opposed of this that remained at that time was Sa'id ibn al-Musayyab. Also, fourthly, القبر ليس في المسجد بل في حجرة مستقلة وليس المسجد مبنيا عليه بل القبر محفوظ بثلاث جدران وجعل الجدار في زاوية منحرفة عن القبلة حتى لا يستقبله المصلي. So it mentions the grave is not in the masjid, rather it's in a individual room, which was the home of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and the masjid is not built upon it. Rather, the grave is preserved by three walls. There's three walls between the masjid and the grave, and the wall is in a corner that is facing a different direction to the Qibla, so the person does not pray towards it. Also, lastly, Al-Masjid al-Nabawi له مزية في الصلاة وشد الرحل وغيره. There are specific things about the Prophet's masjid, and one is that there's a 1,000 times more reward of praying Jama'ah there, or Salah there, and it's of the masajid that the Prophet Muhammad said it's permissible for one to exert their efforts in traveling to. لا تشد الرحال إلا إلى ثلاثة مساجد. It's not permissible to exert effort in travels to any masajid except for free. Masjid al-Haramain, the Mecca wal Medina, Masjid al-Nabawi, wa Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, the last evidence that is mentioned, لأحمد رحمه الله بسند جيد عن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه مرفوعا إن من شرار الناس من تدركهم الساعة وهم أحياء والذين يتخذون القبور مساجد. It mentioned, indeed, from the most evil of the people are the ones who the final hour is established whilst they are alive, and those who take the graves as masajid, places of worship. Now, why does it mention those who are alive when the final hour comes? This is because of the hadith لا تقام الساعة إلا على شرار الخلق or شرار الخلق. That the final hour will not be established except upon the most evil of the people. So those who are alive at the time when the final hour is established, فَهُمْ مِنْ شَرَارِ الْخَلْقِ, they are from the most evil of the people. And those who are from the most evil of the people, from the things that they will do, is take the graves as places of worship. They will go there, they make dua to the grave, they pray there, they slaughter there. All of these actions of shirk. These are from the most evil of the people. So we stop here, inshallah ta'ala. After salah, we continue with Bulugh al-Maram. بإذن الله تعالى. اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا وحبيبه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.